So before I went to Hong Kong for the first time, I was a picky eater. I was a picky eater. I would say that I loved all kinds of foods because I, wanted to be cool and wanted everybody to think that, I was fine with whatever. But I would find ways to push aside or discreetly overlook any dish involving the long list of offensive ingredients to me. So when I was preparing to live there for several months and understood that it would be an offense to the people if I didn't eat their food, I needed to re-examine the truth of my culinary preferences. I need to figure out, okay, is it just that I don't want to try it, or do I really have an aversion to these foods? In order to show true acceptance of the people with whom I shared space, I had to be willing to change the way that I experienced those flavors and the sources of the ingredients. Pig's fallopian tubes, anyone? That was a dish there, and I learned really quickly to tell them not to tell me what it is before I tried it. Because I had to try it first, and usually I liked it. And then I was like, wow, I just ate pig's fallopian tubes. Whew, pretty cool. But I would not have ever experienced so many amazingly creative and wildly tasty things if I had held on to this fact of the dislikes that I had. It was a fact for a while. I just disliked that. I don't like it. I had to let go of that. So this is relevant. To overcome racism, then, to be justice and righteousness in this world and live out the conviction that our denomination has set out, that racism is not compatible with Christian teaching. It's complex, right? It's a nuanced endeavor requiring much more than just doing a service project to overcome the way that we perceive things. It is also essential if we are to be a people who make disciples, again, a Methodist thing, make disciples for the transformation of the world, all the world. So this is why we're spending these 6 weeks working through this, talking through how to live this out. So to live out the conviction that racism is not compatible with Christian teaching is to be a just people. And remember, a few weeks ago, for those who weren't here, justice and righteousness go together in the Hebrew Bible. Those two words almost always go together, indicating this recognition of injustice, so the justice there, and working to make things right. So not just seeing it, but being a part of how to make it right. So we talked about how we first must understand and accept that God is pleased with us, that God loves all of us, and personally we have to know that. That we don't have to be superhuman, right? We are just enough. God has already equipped us. That we are better together and must be of one heart, a just unity. And it is a vocation, a way of being, a just calling. So today's readings tell us a bit more of what doing justice looks like. God speaks to the people of Israel through Isaiah. He's saying, and this is my paraphrase, you come together to pray and worship. You act as if you want to hear me, and it looks rather convincing. You complain that I do not answer your prayers, notice your offerings and your activities in service to the community. But where is the real evidence of your devotion? You argue with each other while you gather together. You blame everybody else and talk about each other behind their backs. What does it matter if you fast and pray and hold community events if you do not have love? If you do not love me, truly. This is what I want, God is saying. Share your food and resources with those who have little or none. Invite the homeless poor into your homes. Open your eyes to the poor and the afflicted, and welcome them as family. Show me the evidence of my great love in you, your love for others. Then you will know the healing balm of my presence. You will be strengthened, spiritually satisfied. You will be known as people who make a difference in the community. You will be known as people who do something about injustices and work to make things right. A people that can be trusted. A people who are safe. Are we? Are we a people who can be trusted? A church that looks like a safe place to the residents of Durand. A denomination to the people of our country. Are we safe? Edgardo Colton Emmerich, professor of theology at Duke, wrote in one of the UMC web resources that I often look at. And he asked the question, is there a future for Methodism? And he says, Wesley had his doubts. Even Wesley did. 5 years before his death, in his thoughts on Methodism, he famously said, I am not afraid that the people called Methodists should ever cease to exist. He didn't have a fear that, that Methodism would fall apart. But I am afraid lest they should only exist as a dead sect, having the form of religion without the power. In his 1789 sermon, Causes of the Inefficacy of Christianity, he wonders, what mystery is this, that Christianity should have done so little good in the world? So he was very concerned about not just saying that people follow Jesus, that they're Methodists, but that they live in power. John Wesley believed that God raised the Methodist people not to form a sect, but to reform the nation, and particularly the church, and to spread scriptural holiness over the land. Holy love, and this is what Eduardo is saying, holy love is the end of Methodism. By the power of the Holy Spirit, we are to reform. We are a reform, renewal, and revival movement that makes disciples of Jesus Christ, not simply disciples of John Wesley, for the transformation of the world, not simply for congregational growth. If we gather together only to move through the actions that a church is supposed to do, without the presence and the power of the Spirit in us, with us, we have become a sect indeed. Static, inconsequential. But if we come together, ready to hear the voice of Jesus, open to be changed within, transformed, renewed, transforming, renewing, then we are empowered to be transformative, a conduit for the reformation of the nation. It seems, however, that our tendency as a church has been, and I mean general church, not this one in particular per se, the tendency of the church has been more maintenance of the status quo than reformation. And by status quo, I mean compliance with those who occupy places of power, which could be those who have a lot of money, which often is the reason, or the loudest voice. And by power, I mean the exertion of control over a majority who lack the resources or recourse to challenge that control and who are denied access to that privilege. So again, oftentimes it's people with money or introverted personality type. People who are more introverted because the people who are louder don't listen. I'm guilty of that. are meant to live by another power, a different kind of power. In point of fact, we are already made for it. And we have access to this source of this other power, always. Do we look like a church that is living as empowered by this source, the very Spirit of God, the God of the universe? Does Durand UMC look like a church that's composed of people who are empowered by the Spirit of God? Well, I would say I absolutely see evidence of that. But this is for our listening, our hearing. So I appreciated you sharing that Native American prayer. I came across this woman, Caitlin Curtis. She's a Native American Christian author and speaker, and is an enrolled member of the Potawatomi Citizen Band. And someone who has grown up in the Christian faith. Caitlin writes on the intersection of indigenous spirituality, faith in everyday life, and the church. So as a Christian and Native American, Curtis she has a nuanced perspective that she can offer those who do not share her cultural heritage. In this wisdom, she observes, we are being called to practice sacred kinship. Isn't that beautiful? We're called to practice sacred kinship with one another and all other things. How often do we consider our relationships with one another as sacred? A kinship even. And I love how she emphasizes that this is a practice, an ongoing phenomenon. We don't just all of a sudden be that way, and we continue to have to practice it, to live out our relationship in this way. Is there evidence of this among us? Where are we seeing that? And here Curtis offers some instruction. She says, as humans, we are wired to stop and breathe, to pause, to pay attention to our weariness. If this weren't so, we wouldn't need the Sabbath or hibernation. She says, in the Anishinaabe culture, I think that's how you say it, we see the winter months. So they look to nature to inform the way they move through life. We see the winter months as a time to rest, to gather in, to tell stories. We follow the animals' cues to harvest in the autumn and hibernate as the snow blankets the cold earth beneath us. And hopefully the snow will hold off so we can get home safely. It is also a good time to notice and to listen to that source of life. Notice the life that is already in you, the power. To breathe in the truth of our divine image. To breathe out our confession when we rush exceptionally quickly to judgment and forget to see that divine image in each other. Breathe in what is real about your identity. Breathe out the facade, the fake. And speaking of fake, we hear a lot about so-called fake news. And we hear it, the accusation, along the whole spectrum. So I am not speaking anything politically here, okay? Just to be clear. We throw that at each other. Fake news. It matters not what perspective you come from. The accusations of misinformation, inaccuracies, and all manner of fakery help those who disagree. What is real? What is fake? What evidence can one present to another whose only retort is, well, that's fake news? How can you have a conversation with that when that's our go-to? But we also all know, either by our own experience or some others who are close to us, that memory is slippery. Whatever facts we hold in our noggins are factual inasmuch as we currently remember them. I've even told someone a narrative whose source I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember where I heard it from, only to find out that it was the person that I'm telling the story to is the one who told me it. It happens. Not uncommon, two people witnessing an identical situation will remember vastly different, even contrary elements. It's not that either or both of them are lying. Rather, they each ascribe different meaning to the things they saw and focus on varying aspects, making the scenario appear nearly as two separate events sometimes. So facts aren't reliable. Knowledge, though, is not the point. Paul said to the Corinthian church, "I did not come to you with lofty words or wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and of power." God reveals through the Spirit. The Spirit searches even the depths of God. Knowledge. So that, and this is why, so that we may understand the gifts. These gifts that are bestowed on us by God. That's why. We interpret spiritual things, not worldly facts, fake or otherwise. Those who are spiritual discern all things. We have the mind of Christ, who has the mind of God, so us. And not subject to worldly scrutiny. That is, society's facts and accumulated knowledge cannot try the spiritual knowledge as at a court's trial. It is known by the power, the evidence of the spiritual gifts bestowed on us. And that God decreed these things before the ages, for our glory, before the foundations of the world. This spiritual knowledge, the power of God's Spirit, was already given. So where is the evidence of our belief? So I have this video, and it shows a beautiful example of some evidence of this happening. And for some reason, when I try to clip it down, it ends up doing this laggy thing. So you'll maybe see people's mouths moving and you won't hear the words or whatever. But I want you to watch it and listen for the words and just see the people. And yes, so let's.
It was billed as the surprise of a lifetime.
Does anybody know what this is about?
And sure enough,
They didn't tell you anything?
when these high school seniors gathered for the big reveal, up walked a guy they'd never seen to tell them something they'd never forget.
Right now, this next minute, is the most important moment of my life.
Pete Cadence is a wealthy businessman. He grew up here in Toledo, Ohio, and he says the time has come to give back.
I think that Toledo could be one of the most equitable middle market communities in this country. And so if you want to make a big difference, you go to the epicenter of inequity.
Scott High School has some of the most disadvantaged students in the state, but the school is still rich with dreams. Kids like senior Chris Rowland, who would love to go to college, but can't afford it, especially now. Last fall, Chris's mom, Abina, lost her job, and his dad died in a house fire.
My dad was the closest person I had in my life. In his later days, he was really pushing me to go to college. He kept saying, "You're really smart, you should think about going."
He was such an awesome father. He's still gonna make him proud. I know he is.
Just gotta figure out a path.
Yeah. Fortunately, unbeknownst to Chris, that path to a brighter future was about to find him.
And if you're sitting here in this room today, as a soon-to-be graduating senior, tuition, room and board, books and fees will be paid for you, and you will go to college for free.
And there was more. Because poverty is an intergenerational problem, and because he is determined to snuff it out in this community, Pete offered each kid a study partner.
So too can one of your parents go to college or trade school for free.
Abina says she always wanted to be a school counselor. Altogether, this could cost Pete up to $3 million. And now he wants to get others to pitch in, to expand the program to every public school in Toledo.
And this is how we change the world.
Which is why, if you could look up through that gym ceiling, as Chris did, I'm sure you'd see a dad beaming with gratitude. Ouch.
I ask you only one favor in return.
But here's what really stuck with me.
Please don't ever use the word gift to describe what I did here today.
Why not? I wondered. Certainly, as our story went viral this week, that's the word many people use to describe his offer. What other word could you use?
Only use the word responsibility.
Over the years, I've done a lot of stories about wealthy people doing good deeds, but I've never heard of one with this catch. Don't say Pete gave you a gift, say he fulfilled his responsibility. Because gift implies he had a choice, whereas responsibility implies obligation.
Pete Cadence also grew up in Toledo, but he attended a much wealthier school where college was expected. He worked hard and started 3 different companies. For that reason, Pete could easily claim to be a self-made man, but that's not how he framed it in his speech.
What became of my life was as much a factor of the inequities that exist in our society today as it was my skills, my talents, and my work ethic.
In other words, Pete says he didn't win at life fair and square. He says many successful people don't.
The competitive set that people I compete with were a lot smaller than it otherwise could be if everyone got the same level of education. And Martin Luther King always said, history has a long and sordid path of people and groups with privilege protecting their privilege. Well, I'm done protecting my privilege.
Pete Cadence changed many lives that day. Now he's hoping to change mindsets, too.
I hope others share in my responsibility in Toledo and around the world. Thank you.
Steve Hartman, on the road, in Toledo.
When someone sees his offering as a responsibility, sharing because it is her duty, something that ought to be done, it makes it much more difficult to ignore. When we take a moment to breathe in the truth of our privilege and breathe out the impulse to protect it, we are compelled to do something about it. When I breathe in the realization that what became of my life is as much a factor of the inequalities that exist in our society today as anything else, and breathe out my part in perpetuating a perception that it's somehow their fault for not trying hard enough or some similar sentiment, then maybe my gifts, given by the very Spirit of God, might contribute to the project of making things right, the transformation of the world. Jesus said in Matthew, if you have lost your saltiness, your flavor, what good are you? Maintain your unique flavor. Notice and appreciate the unique flavors of one another. Expand your perspective of what delicious is. Enjoy the infinite gifts and evidence of God's goodness in this world. Be a light. Evidence of your devotion to God. You are a light. Let it shine. Be just evidence. Amen. And so